This land and white settlement might soon be home to a monument that looked over Dallas for decades until the city ushered it away.
We are the largest, most comprehensive museum in the country as far as having both the Union artifacts and the Confederate artifacts.
Cindy Harriman is executive director of the 13-year-old Texas Civil War Museum. It's one of the places Dallas City Council will consider moving the Robert E. Lee statue it didn't want.
We're a Civil War museum, and Robert E. Lee, of course, is best known for his Civil War service.
The museum displays Robert E. Lee artifacts, but it shows the other side of the war, too, including the coat Ulysses Grant wore when Lee surrendered.
The goal is to show American history and what it took for us to have the nation that we have, and to show the lifestyle of the 19th century.
This statue has been in limbo since crews took it down in September. It was shipped off to Hensley Field in Grand Prairie. A task force made recommendations on what to do with it and other Confederate symbols last year, but the council pumped the brakes. In the meantime, city staff visited places like the J.N. Long Cultural Arts Center in Cleburne, along with the War Museum, though it did not officially disclose what places it was considering. Now, council is scheduled to take the Confederate matter up again. It'll also hear recommendations on what to do with the Confederate War Memorial near the Kay Bailey Hutchison Convention Center. The task force wanted it to move to a museum, but it would be costly, and the staff is now recommending historical markers be added for context. And context is what the Civil War Museum says it can add to the Lee statue, one of the larger figures in the Civil War.
We have always had people say that this is a very good museum. It's non-political, and it's a great place to learn, and we're hoping that that's how it will be received.
We want him to stay here. We know he's coming down, but you know what? That's not going to stop us from coming out here.
We want a voice.
We want a voice, okay?
We want our voice.
The city wasn't given a voice. The city wasn't given a vote. They voted him in the city council and the mayor, and he did not give a vote to the people. That's unheard of. They could have put it on the November election. Let the people have a say-so in it. I've heard about all these polls. There's 70-something% in favor. We've had black people, we've had white people, we have yellow people drive by us over Jeff Day giving us a thumbs up saying keep the monuments. But we've also had the negative, okay? A lot of the people that are negative aren't even from here. We're from here. My son was born here. My grandson's born here. I lived here 50-something years. My dad was in the Army. That's why I wasn't born here. My dad fought in 3 wars for us to do the things we want to do. And here I am. I'm doing what I want to do to try to have a say-so to protect him.
What's it going to be like watching him come down tomorrow?
I'll tell you what it felt like with the other ones. I cried. It's so sad. When you remove history from a city that is full of history, what have you got? Where's it going to stop?
It wasn't long ago that patriotism was admired and history was embraced. No confusion on what we stood for. History is littered with the remains of toppled statues. In 2016, a campaign began not only to abandon history, but to replace it. Destruction and removal of over 100 monuments and statues across the United States and even around the world began. Protests happened. In 2020, historical statues and monuments were targets of vandalism and destruction, leading to demonstrations and riots causing not only destruction but even death. Non-government organizations employed and recruit activists who participated. Citizens never got a vote.
Constant reframing you want to do for us?
Of course there is, Lawrence. When I think about, Mr. Cotton, when I think about the other gentleman who's doing this reenacting, I think that what we have to remember is that these men have preserved this ideology so successfully because they turn our idea of, they're saying you're going to erase our history. And what they're saying actually is, you're trying to revise, edit, and fact check a history that we already approved and that our ancestors wrote. And they're not actually allowing for the proper editorial process of how something successful gets written to be undertaken. They want to have us accept their narrative wholesale. And it's been accepted wholesale up to this point. And I think that it's now time for us all to be responsible documentarians of the actual bones of their narrative.
Caroline, one of the comments I was struck by early in Tremaine's documentary was the woman who compared the way the South treats this history to the way Germany treats their Nazi history. That's a point you made on this show in your first appearance.
Yeah, that line struck me dumb the first time I watched this documentary, because that auction block is just sitting without any context in the middle of a cheerful square. Last I checked, Auschwitz, Dachau, the camps that have become museums to honor the people who were murdered there, the genocide that was undertaken there, to demand reproach for the soldiers who committed those atrocities, those places have been put into context. They are solemn and they are rigorous in discussing the horrors. That's just a little cheerful block in the middle of a little cheerful southern quaint street. And she just says, wasn't that lovely that you can touch history? You can see where somebody might have been sold. But there's no demanding of context, and there's no demanding of context because she knows, and we all know, that it was left there to intimidate, to shame, to harrow, right? It's not the same at all.
Was this tragedy that happened in Charlottesville really necessary? Is it really the sign of white supremacy, or were average citizens upset because they did not get a vote to see what statues might replace what's there? Have the two sides of this recent history been intentionally distorted to divide us, to cause chaos, and people to disrespect one another's perspective? There were two sides to this, and there were people who actually had permits to do those demonstrations, and some that did not. And the ones that did not got angry and violent and called names and changed the narrative. Listen.
What you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
On both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo. And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue, and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do love
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the
So who made these decisions to replace our statues and memorials with this art? And who's getting paid? Is it a non-government organization? In this case, they were paid millions. Did you know? Do you think that the destruction promoted unity or it changed minds? Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.